and narrative as we talk about and deal with the changing narrative from problems to power, particularly as an emphasis on African American men and their participation in the electoral process. I want everybody to know that this is a very critical issue, as we all know, because this is one of the most critical time in our nation's history. It's a time where we have to, as we talk about the reality of what's happening in our country, and we're going to go around the country in various cities and states and talk to leaders who are in those communities who are trying to engage the community to get them to take their souls to the polls, to recognize that together we have the power, to recognize that we didn't come this far just to be turned back now. Because if this nation and our community is going to be saved, again, it's going to be up to us. We've done it before. We've been here before. It seems undaunting or daunting that we are here again, but the devil is busy and he keeps on keeping on, walking around, seeking whom he may destroy. We do not want him to destroy us in our fervor and our intentionality to go out and vote. Just here today in Michigan, in Detroit, we were able to beat back this lawsuit, a lawsuit that was coming and filed by a Republican candidate for Secretary of State. Now, I know we got Republicans and Democrats and independents and some folk who don't know how they want to be categorized in the political process. So it's not about a partisanship. It's really about a policy and a program and an intentionality to deal with our situation. It just happens to be, for the most part, these initiatives are coming from extremist right-wing Republicans, or many of them who are associated with them. So this lady, who is a candidate for the Secretary of State, wants to throw out all of the ballots, not from the state of Michigan, but from one city, the city of Detroit, which is the largest city in the state of Michigan, the largest with the most African Americans who live here. And she wants to prevent our absentee ballots from being counted. Well, thank God, there is still some sanity around here, where the circuit court ruled that this would be certainly an extreme burden on the city of Detroit. And we've already turned in 60,000 with more being counted, and they sat on their hands until this time period. So it should not go unnoticed that it is too late, too little, too much for the citizens of Detroit. And so it's unacceptable and cannot be permitted. This kind of nonsense is going on all around the country. And I'm sure if we go to Texas or Georgia, Ohio or Florida, we'll find similar kind of situations where people are using whatever means they can to discourage the vote and to stop us from voting. So I'm pleased to be joined with colleagues from around the country, among them Derek Johnson, who's the president nationally for the NAACP. I want to acknowledge Bishop J. Drew Sheard, who is the presiding prelate of the Church of God in Christ. I want to recognize Reverend Dr. David Peoples, senior pastor of the Jabez Missionary Church in Lexington, president of the Progressive National Baptist Convention. I want to recognize Reverend Dr. Stephen Bland Jr., who's a senior pastor of the Liberty Temple Baptist Church, president of the Council of Baptist Pastors in Detroit and vicinity. I want to recognize Reverend Dr. Tellis Chapman, senior pastor of Galilee Missionary Baptist Church in the city of Detroit. I want to recognize a friend, brother, Reverend Dr. Frederick Haynes III, senior pastor, the Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. I want to recognize Reverend Dr. Mark Kelly Tyler, senior pastor of Mother Bethel AME Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I want to recognize our friend and brother, Bishop Antonio Palmer, senior pastor of the Kingdom Celebration Center, presiding bishop of Kingdom Alliance of Churches of International out of Odenton, Maryland. I want to recognize Reverend Dr. Barrett Berry, senior pastor of the Elm Church out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And of course, I want to recognize Reverend Mark Moore, senior pastor of the Faith Covenant Church in Atlanta, Georgia. welcome and thank you to all of you. Bishop Paul Morton will be joining us at 6 o'clock. I know that Bishop Shear, who will be coming on, has got to make a move relative to an engagement he has tonight. And I'm going to ask that those individuals who might log on accidentally, if you would go back to the original YouTube that you were sent and log on, and that will be most acceptable. You can still get on to this line. This particular Zoom is for the participants in this program. If you happen to hear phones ringing in the background, that's us in action. We are doing phone banking. We got folk calling in as we speak, because this is important and we didn't want to stop. This is the eve of the election, and so we don't want to stop the fight in order to have no discussion. And so Miss Maia, who happens to be my daughter, I know, if you would just go back to that original YouTube, we would appreciate it. Let me start by asking Dr. Haynes. We were talking offline. I mean, and let me just share something with the body, and then you can react to this, all of you. Studies show that a number of Black Americans eligible to vote for president reached a record 30 million in 2020. More than 1/3 living in 9 of the nation's most competitive states: Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wisconsin. A higher share than the 29% of all U.S. eligible voters who live in these states. Nationwide, Black eligible voters now make up 12.5% of the U.S. electorate, up from 11.5% in 2000. The Pew Research Center, which we're all familiar with, reports that in the state of Georgia, as an example, 2.4 million Black eligible voters make up 32% of the electorate, the highest share among these 9 states, followed by Florida, North Carolina, and Michigan in 4th place with 1 million voters. 13%, however, for Black men. In particular, nearly half of who are registered to vote have not gone to the polls, Freddie, in the past 5 consecutive elections. In fact, 39% of Black voters have been men and 61% have been women. Why? Is that because many can't vote under state laws that disenfranchise Black men because of prior felony convictions or incarceration? Or is it because brothers, for some reason, feel as though we ain't talking to them, they don't matter, or that message is not generating the kind of concern and interest that Black men should have? I mean, I'm gonna start with Freddie, but I'd like to get some other takes on this as well. Dr. Haynes.
Yeah, and Dr. Anthony, thank you so much for your leadership. You remain one of our premier prophetic voices, and for that we thank you. And thank you again to the NAACP for your leadership and for this all-important conversation. I'll put it to you like this. It's been a combination, basically, of everything you just said. On the one hand, there's been, and we cannot underestimate, there has been an intentional effort on the part of the right wing to ensure that everything possible, especially since the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, everything possible to ensure that our right to vote is compromised, if not wiped out. And I think our senator, the Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, says it well. There are some people who don't want some people to vote. And unless you are, Rip Van Winkle, you know who the some people are on both sides. Some people don't want some people to vote. And right now, we are talking about the some people on this side who have experienced what? Relentless policy efforts to suppress the vote in our community, to the point where, I'm in the state of Texas, and I intentionally added an S onto the suffix of the state because of the jackassical policies that basically said, and a university study put it like this: it said the Texas was the most difficult state in the country to vote. A university study revealed that in 2020. 2021, in response to the so-called racial reckoning, in light of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, what does the governor of Texas do but utilize two sessions, special sessions, legislative sessions, determined to do what? Attack, quote unquote, voter fraud, only to discover another study that comes out and says there were no incidents of voter fraud at all in the state of Texas, and yet tax-paying dollars were spent to pay for sessions, legislative sessions, to pass, again, more extreme voter suppression laws. So I don't want us to underestimate the fact that there is an atmosphere in this country that says we don't want some people to vote. At the same time, I need us to understand that there are those oftentimes who are our color ain't our kind, and they add to the confusion, Killer Mike and Ice Cube, by basically saying, in essence, hey, no one is speaking to our issues. Well, people speak to your issues when you speak to them. And as far as I'm concerned, we have a voice. And so when we go to the polls and vote, and when we, beyond election day, organize and mobilize to pass policies that are reflected in the needs we have in our community, then our voices are heard. And so I say to all of my beloved brothers, when you don't vote, that means people who don't think anything of you and are trying to do everything they can to hijack your community, you basically have given them additional power and an extra vote. So they have your vote that was not cast, and they have their vote that they do cast. And so I don't want us to underestimate, again, there are those who don't want us to vote. At the same time, why cooperate with people who don't have our best interests at heart?
I appreciate that, Freddie. And for the record, ass is in the Bible, so I'm sure people have heard that before. So we understand. I'm pleased to have joined with us President of the National NAACP, Attorney Derek Johnson, and also Bishop Jeju Sheard, who is the head of the Church of God in Christ. Thank you both for joining with us. I want to turn to Derek and Bishop Sheard. I know they both have appointments. I want to try to get them in while they're here. So President Johnson, you just heard that conversation. And I know the NAACP is concerned about mobilization and participation from everybody, with a particular emphasis on Black men. Where are we at on this? And what's your take in terms of how we stimulate and motivate, and not only keep the women where they are, but bring the brothers and the men up to where we know we can be and should be?
First of all, Reverend Anthony, thank you for facilitating the conversation. Dr. Pierre, thanks for always helping us pull together religious leaders. And I now know the word for the day is jackassery. And thank you, Freddie Haynes, for sharing that unique perspective. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. And as I moved around 6 churches yesterday with Pastor Moore, who's on the line, the enthusiasm, the energy that I've seen from individuals in our community, male and female, young and old, was off the chain. And so one of the things that I am beginning to recognize is that if we promote a deficit narrative, we get a deficit outcome. And truth be told, African-American men perform higher than everybody else in this country outside of Black women. And we look at everything with a level of excellence. Let's understand that excellence, that even if there is a departure by 2 or 3 percentage points between performance of African-American men and women, we think is a problem. That's a good thing, that we should always pursue excellence. And in that pursuit of excellence, we should also recognize that we're outperforming most other people in any community. Now, we do have those outliers, those individuals who are given voice to foolishness because they are led astray, giving voice to foolishness because they lack the information. And for some of those voices, I ask them to stick to your game. And if your game is a rapper, be a good rapper. Don't come over here when you don't understand the long-term nature of movements and the issue of building Black political power. Our issues will not be changed because of the transaction of one election. It is a movement over several elections as we move in a direction that's necessary to have the type of quality of life that we want all of our community to have. In fact, but for the Black vote, the concept of democracy would not be going in the direction of perfection because we are the community, male, female, young, old, that have challenged to perfect democracy, and it's been done through our vote. And so for this election, whether you're in Atlanta, Georgia, or in Georgia in general, where we're going to see history, whether you're in Michigan, where we're going to hold the line, whether you're in Texas, where we're going to break some barriers, whether you're in Florida or North Carolina, we must always talk from a surplus mindset. But with that said, recognize when you have outliers, individuals from our community for whatever reasons, whether it's for profit or lack of understanding, that we have to take to the woodshed or at least show that there's a better arc in the direction that most of our people want to go. That's really important because voter suppression is as much about stopping people getting to the polls as it is recruiting Herschel Walker to run in Georgia when he was living in Texas. That's also a form of voter suppression. Voter suppression is about us adopting the slave master's language about what we cannot do, what we have not done, and how it's not possible, as opposed to understanding that our job is to make possible what other people think is impossible. And that's the work of not only the Black church, but the Black community in this context. So I want to thank all of you who have joined this Zoom to have this conversation, because it is our job to lead the way. It is our job to show a standard of excellence and talk from a position of excellence. And it's frustrating for us when we see our brothers lagging behind by a few percentage points from our sisters, although we're outpacing everyone else. And the last one I want to say here, we should never talk about how Black folks don't vote. The problem with this country is we don't vote as a country. That if 95% of the population of Australia is voting, and 92% of the population in Canada is voting, and 93% of the population in Germany is voting, and we celebrate a high turnout because we barely can get over 60%, we got a problem with the delivery of our democracy and access to voting, and it's structural, it's not communal. And in many of our communities, if you compare apples with apples, we are voting at par, and in some areas at a higher percentage than other communities. And so we need to be talking from that perspective, because it's that perspective that give our people power, encouragement to do what's necessary. So that deficit mindset is something that we got to do away with and talk from our surpluses, because we have and will lead the way.
Thanks, Attorney Johnson. We appreciate that perspective. I want to go to Bishop Sheard, and if you can unmute, and I'm going to get to everybody. Everybody's going to get in this. I certainly want to go to everybody, so be patient with me and with us, because we want to get everybody in this, and we're going to, hopefully you can stay with us until we get through this whole process, because this is a good discussion. But Bishop Sheard, you're the head of the Church of God in Christ, a historic body, you everywhere. I think you based in Detroit, you are, but we know the church down there. I know you're in Tennessee now. And so I thank you for getting on. But Bishop is my friend and brother and head of the church. What's your approach? I know you all have some programs going, but when you hear all this stuff, how you beating the bushes to shake loose more of us to come to the polls?
Well, thank you, Dr. Anthony, and to all of our distinguished members that are on this panelist. I certainly praise God for each of you. We have in the Church of God in Christ have had a nationwide push to vote in this election. Of course, we had a very unique situation because a lot of our members will be here in Memphis, Tennessee tomorrow, which is election day. Fortunately, we have been pushing from day one to vote by absentee ballot. It is so important that we do that because we want to still make a difference in the different areas. I met with the bishops in Georgia and set up a team, particularly in Georgia, to help with that election. Of course, we have here in, excuse me for saying here, but in Michigan, we have what is called the Michigan Council of Bishops, and we had a program set up to urge our people to vote in this coming election. And so we have not taken a passive approach to this. I've talked to several bishops and groups of bishops across the country. We had our bishops conference in Chicago in September, where we had a forum with them about the necessity of voting, the necessity of urging our people to vote. And we had a session urging them to be careful and look at the different proposals that are being presented, and let's get a comprehensive understanding of what this means to our people. I think sometimes we in leadership can get carried away with what is best for us as individuals, which is not a good place to be if you're in leadership, and particularly in leadership of Black people. We've got to put aside what's best for us. I'll never forget, Dr. Haynes, I appreciate you so much. I'll never forget one day, my daughter, when she was becoming of age to vote, and she asked me, she said, "Daddy," she said, "why do you vote Democrat instead of Republican?" Because of the Republican platform can be a better assistance to us where we are. And I looked at her and I thought at that particular time that it was time for us to have a heart-to-heart discussion about what's going on in our country. And I shared with her that it's not about me and you, because God has blessed us to get to a certain point, but it's about the people that look to us for leadership. And a lot of times we could vote one way that would be beneficial to us, but we must always keep in mind the people that God has favored us to lead. We've got to make decisions that's going to be better for them. We've got to instill that even in the up and coming generation. I'm so glad for my nephew, Brother Mark Moore. We got to instill that in people like him so that we'll know that we have to make decisions based on what will be beneficial for the people that we lead. And so this is an issue that I'm pushing forth in the Church of God in Christ, of course, and not only in Michigan, but across this country, that we have to make those decisions that are important, and we can't sit around and wait. Of course, Dr. Anthony and Reverend Tellis Chapman, you know what happened here. I keep saying here, I'm in Tennessee, but you know what happened in Michigan years ago when we became passive and thought we had it down packed. We thought we had the election wrapped up with former Governor Jim Blanchard, and a lot of people took it very passively, and we woke up the next morning to a new governor who went immediately after the programs that benefited our people. And so I used that throughout, and I hear you, Dr. Johnson, and but I had to use that issue, that example, to let people know how important it was for them to participate in this election, because the polls are close, and we don't want our people to become somewhat relaxed and passive, and then we wake up the next morning and it's not what we wanted. So I appreciate it. I do apologize that I cannot stay on the call. I've got to speak at a banquet, and it's been a long day of doing interviews as we prepare for our annual Holy Convocation. But I certainly appreciate, Reverend Anthony, you asking me, inviting me to be upon this distinguished panel. And so that is my take. I hope I was able to give you some insight into what we were doing.
Thank you, Bishop. And I know you told me that you had another engagement. Well, I appreciate that. Whenever you have to exit, we all understand. Thank you for your leadership. I also want to say to the people that are looking at this, you can also get into the chat. Please, if you have a question or comment, put it into the chat. And Dr. Pierre, thank God for her, Zena Pierre, who's been very helpful facilitating all of this. We thank you because wherever we go, the sisters are always there. And so we appreciate her involvement with us. Put your comments, your questions, or concerns in the chat. I want to go to Pastor Moore, and then I certainly want to go to Pastor Palmer, and I'm getting to everybody. But obviously, the elephant in the room is not really an elephant, but it's everybody knows. How in the heaven can we be where we are in Atlanta, Georgia? How can any brothers with any kind of sense be talking about Herschel Walker? He was good on the field, but this is a whole new area. I mean, we should not be where we are. And when I hear and we see where the polls are, we see that the amount of money that's been put into Raphael Warnock. I even heard a preacher talk about that God really is supporting Herschel Walker, and God is supporting Herschel Walker, and not Raphael Warnock. And he's in the pulpit and he's talking about bringing people. I mean, I don't even have to elaborate on that. But I'm just saying, where are we in Atlanta? What are we doing? Where are the brothers at in this situation? And what's the 411 down in the AC?
Well, I must begin by thanking you again, Dr. Anthony and Dr. Zena and the entire team that has pulled us together. In moments like this, I wish that I could claim Detroit. I wish I could claim Dallas. But right now I am in Atlanta, and I'm confused. I am perplexed. I don't mean any disrespect, but I'm afraid that our dear brother Herschel Walker, I think he played too many games without a helmet on, because for him to even think that he would be a qualified candidate to run for Senate and to sit as a representative for millions of citizens of the state of Georgia, compared to a man like Senator Warnock, whose work has spoken for him in both academia and both his, of course, his work at Ebenezer, just his scholarly research. It is nothing more than yet another example of the desperation that some people, as Dr. Haynes mentioned so eloquently, some people have stooped to. The fact that this is even a conversation, the fact that this is even an option, the fact that we're even, dare I say, nervous to some degree, is just further confirmation that racism is very much alive, especially here in the great state of Georgia. And so to answer the question, where are the brothers? What are we doing? My hope and my prayer is that we are prepared to do what needs to be done tomorrow. Many of us have exercised our right to vote early. Many of us have gone to the polls already and tried to secure our voice, but there is still much to be doing. There's still much to be done, rather. There's much that we can still be doing even on the eve of election. And I'm hoping that all of us, certainly those citizens of Atlanta and Metro Atlanta, and the entire state of Georgia, are not falling into the trap of complacency. My fear, and I think that we've all seen this in our respective states and cities in times past, is that we get comfortable, we get complacent, and we play the game of there's no way he could win. I still remember election night. We were in revival at our church, and I remember we were all saying there's no way Donald J. Trump, there's absolutely no way he could win. I remember checking CNN every few minutes and noticing the map was getting redder and redder. And I remember going home after church and just staring at the television, waiting for them to tell us that this is a mistake. But unfortunately, it was not, because too many of us thought it would be impossible for the wrong side to win. And while I know this is a bipartisan conversation, right is right and wrong is wrong. And so I'm hoping that we do not fall into the trap of complacency and feel that someone else will do it. No one else can use your right to vote. No. They can vote for themselves, but no one else can exercise your right to vote. And so I'm praying and hoping that brothers are doing like I'm doing, and not only making their voice heard, but making their voice known and telling everybody else to do the same, because certainly it works if we all work it. But if we sit on the sideline, if we remain quiet, if we fall into complacency, we will be sitting here in another 4 years, complaining and hoping and griping as a people that things need to change, when in reality, we have an opportunity to make change happen right now. And so I'm hoping that, yes, in Michigan, yes, in Texas, but certainly in Georgia, I'm hoping that we would do what needs to be done, because I don't want to have to explain myself when I go to other cities and tell them that I'm from Atlanta. So that's my prayer, that we will do what needs to be done, and it must be done.
Thank you, Pastor Moore. Let me just say this. I know we are nonpartisan. I got to text him. Remember, I know we're nonpartisan, but we ain't non-political, and we ain't non-factual, and we ain't non-direct to the degree that we can see what's happening here. And let's call it as me. I think I opened up saying that we are NAACP, for example, Republican, Democrat, Independent, and some people who don't know how to categorize them. So we invite in the book everybody to be in it. But bottom line is, these are some serious times. We ain't got time to be playing no games. This is some serious stuff. It's about right and wrong. It's about crazy versus sanity, quite frankly. And so, Bishop Palmer, if you would, I'm in the barbershop, I'm in the grocery store, I'm at the gas station, I'm on the street, and I'm gonna come back to you, Bishop Sheard. Okay. But I want to go to Bishop Palmer for just a second. I'm a brother, and I ain't voting, but I want to vote. And then all of a sudden, I'm hearing that everybody's the same. Speak to my heart. What do you say to me? I mean, let me know. Tell me something.
Wow. First of all, let me just say thank you, Dr. Anthony, for your leadership, also leading this dynamic discussion on Black men voting. Also want to just give a shout out to my dear friend, Dr. Zena Pierre. We're right here in wonderful state of Maryland, representing Be More Where You See More. So Dr. Anthony, definitely understand and have heard those same sentiments. And as we canvass the marginalized communities, and particularly, African-American communities.
I think we lost that connection.
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We're good. So yeah, we hear that. We've heard that repetitively. That as far as my vote don't matter. What am I voting for? And particularly, we haven't been doing the best job. I believe we're going to do a much greater job. We've been doing good, but we have to do a greater job as far as starting early and ongoing with our community engagement as it pertains to the political process. We're so far behind when it comes to this. And also, we probably wouldn't have what we're having in Georgia with Herschel Walker if we had a concerted effort, especially when we can intentionally groom candidates early. And what I mean by that is that number one, we have to come together collectively all over the United States and say, this is what our causes are. And I know we're not monolithic in our approach and our views, but there has to be some commonality. And when we can nationally say, here are our causes, and then disseminate that down to all of the advocates and activists and leaders of different organizations that are out working hard in the communities, and get that and allow us to convey that. And I think that is a little disjointed. But if we can do that and also begin to intentionally groom candidates because the other side is actually doing that. And we kind of like rise up a candidate all of a sudden, and it's close to election time. But I think that if we begin to do that, and that leaders across the nation know that we have candidates that we're grooming up and we're doing it well, I think that would actually help when we're conversing with those who are in the community, especially marginalized community, and those who are saying, what does my vote, why am I voting, why does it matter? Then we can be able to share with them what the causes are, and those causes are coming from our community. The needs and the ask are coming from the community, so where they can relate. And so, we were just out Saturday, and I told my church on Sunday, I said, I think I got a contact, and I probably preach better because I think I smelled enough weed. They done legalized a whole lot of stuff. But, and people, back in our day, we had to hide stuff or whatever, but now people are out in the streets and, more visible and out there. But right when our brothers have, whether they have weed in their hand or not, we're out there conversing and sharing with them why, what our causes are and why we need them to vote. And like another brother had mentioned earlier, even though it was, kind of late in the game, but the response was that I believe that I'm going to vote just because you came out here and shared this information that I didn't know, all right, concerning certain candidates and certain causes. And because I know it now, I'll go and whether we share with them, we provide rides and all kinds of stuff. So I think that push and the education with community engagement has to start early and be ongoing. And we should even be thinking about 2024 right now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Bishop. I know that Bishop Sheard had his hand up, and I know he has to go, and I want to come to him, and then Reverend Kelly and Dr. Bland. So Bishop Sheard, did you have a comment about this?
Yeah,
You're on mute.
Just a quick comment. I don't know if whoever was in the comment section was making reference to my statement about Democrats and Republicans. That was a particular race when I was talking with my daughter. And what we do, however, is say this all across the country, is that the Church of God in Christ has a very unique opportunity because it appears, and I'm gonna say it appears, that the Republican Party's morals seem to mirror closer our morals than the Democratic Party. But at the same time, the Democratic Party provided a lot of programs that are needful for the people that I lead. In saying that, I want to say that it's very, very important that we understand that we are not electing a pastor of the United States or a senator or a person that's going to be in the Senate, a pastor of the state of Georgia. We're electing a senator. Somebody's going to look out for all of the people. And so I did not mean to come across as partisan. My political partisanism is my business, but I say let's vote for the people. I just wanted to clear that up. Thank you, Dr. Anthony.
Well, you're good. You're good, Bishop. You can say whatever you want to say. I mean, I guess in terms of the organization, but I mean, heaven, you good. You can say, however God leads you. You can be partisan, nonpartisan, bipartisan. Yeah. Go ahead. Just speak truth to power. Yes, call it what it is as you see it. So we appreciate you. Right. I want to go to Pastor Reverend Dr. Mark Kelly Tyler in Philadelphia. You all got some stuff going on there. And again, we're trying to motivate folk. And President Peoples, I'm coming to you, and Bland and others. Just give me a minute, stay with me. But I really want to talk about, and have you to talk about, what's happening there. I mean, are you running into similar issues? And what are you doing to stimulate and to motivate and get these folks to take their souls to the polls? Pastor.
Yeah. So I appreciate the question, Pastor Anthony, and also to Reverend Pierre, and to all of you, my brothers who are on this call tonight. I am, in addition to working with the AME Church here in the city of Philadelphia, working with Power Interfaith, which is an affiliate of Faith in Action, formerly known as PICO, where we do civic engagement work all year round. This cycle, we have partnered with Black Clergy of Philadelphia and vicinity, the organization. We've also partnered as well in creating an umbrella group for all of us called Black Faith Votes PA, where we have been working doing 100% voter turnout, which means that we have provided small stipends for each congregation that participates if they select a voter captain who will make sure that each congregation calls through their entire membership roll. And I should note, this is also interfaith. So we're working with African-American Muslim congregations, in Philadelphia, like Detroit, there's a very large African-American Muslim population. So we have imams at the table as well. We've been doing phone banks 4 or 5 times a week with the predictive dialogue.
How is that working?
They're both working great. In fact, it's been wonderful because some of these organizing groups like Faith in Action and other groups, sometimes there's an issue where Black congregations just don't necessarily want to be in that space. And I understand it. There've been times where I've had my ups and downs, but it works for me. By doing Black Faith Votes PA, we have kind of taken away the barrier. You don't have to join. We've got resources and some structure. The Black church has energy and its own insight. So we put those two together. It's been amazing. We're doing Souls to the Polls, giving free rides to folk on tomorrow. And we've been having weekly check-in calls as well. We're working with Dr. Barbara Skinner in sending poll chaplains out on tomorrow as well. Here's what we're up against. Now, I say to folk who give that to me, I do a morning radio show every Monday through Friday on the only Black talk station in Pennsylvania. So every day I get some brother who hits me with voting don't matter, it's a waste of time, all of them are the same, all of that conversation, to which I say that people don't try to steal that which has no value. People don't plot and scheme for that which is worthless. And the fact that in this state, people have consistently tried to wreak havoc with mail-in voting. Now, here's the ironic thing. The Republican Party in 2019, I believe, passed a bill to make no excuse mail-in voting. Lo and behold, the pandemic shows up. And guess who ends up using it more than anyone else? Black folk in places like Philadelphia, Reading, Allentown, Scranton, and Pittsburgh. And so as a result, there has been a concerted effort to end mail-in voting that they put in themselves just 3 years ago, to the point that there is now a rule that says if your ballot is not signed, even if it is in the possession of the county office in time, that if you did not date it, it will not count. Currently, there are 2,000 ballots that meet that criteria right now. So in fact, in a few minutes, I'm going to be jumping off of here to jump on a call to deal with this. All day, we have been calling, matching up that list with the information in the van. And we have been calling those voters to let them know that they must go in to quote unquote cure their ballot. The city has made this easy for them to do, but you got to actually go in to do it. And so we're calling them, but we expect as a result tomorrow, there will be a line of 200 to 300 people all day trying to cure their ballots. So we will be there with poll chaplains, making it a party at the polls. Unlike Georgia, we can still give water out and snacks out and give folk a chair to sit down. But we want to make sure that people do not leave frustrated. Look, y'all, I looked at that list and I found 4 members of my own congregation. And I have been preaching and talking about how to fill out your mail-in ballot for the last 6 to 7 weeks, every Sunday consistently. And so we can't take anything for granted. And so, again, that's what the state of affairs is. So I suspect that tomorrow you will see long lines of Philadelphia City Hall. And beyond that, we are bracing ourselves for not only election deniers, should the election go in one way, but potential threats of violence. But for Black folk in America, we know that ain't nothing new.
When you talk about curing the ballot, what do you mean, Reverend?
So it means that if you forgot to sign it, for example, there are, I think, 300 or 400 people that meet that category. Then you have a chance to come in and actually sign the ballot that you sent in. Those ballots are all grouped together at City Hall. You have an opportunity. Now, look, Philadelphia is unique in this way. Most counties are not giving people the opportunity to fix their ballot. And so if you forgot to put it in the secrecy envelope, I mean, if I showed y'all how difficult it is to fill this ballot out, I'm telling you, it is intentionally complicated and meant to confuse people, which means that there should be no surprise that 3,500 people have ballots that may be thrown out tomorrow. This is anti-democratic. In a city like Philadelphia, where the Constitution and Declaration of Independence were created and signed and ratified in this Commonwealth, for us to find ways to keep people from the franchise instead of trying to find ways to bring people in is absolutely against the spirit of not only this Commonwealth, but the country itself.
Pastor Bland and then President Peoples. I mean, one of the things that we know that some folk have been using absentee ballots and early voting for years, and it worked for them. But when other people started using it, they got a problem with it. And Pastor Kelly just talked about some of the difficulties in terms of the information. I mean, what's the council doing? What are we doing in Detroit in terms of trying to make sure that we don't have obstacles informationally, educationally for folk to access the ballot? And how are we engaging? You know, there was an attack on our city to try to stop us from using mail-in ballots, and that was beat back, thank God, today. But the devil is still busy. I understand that they're going to try to come back with the lawsuit after the election to still try to discount them because they ain't through with this. So where are we, Pastor Bland, in terms of your approach to this?
Well, again, I want to join others in thanking you for assembling this conversation, Reverend Anthony, this most needed one, but also the activation that follows. One of the things, as you know, that helps make some of these things different is we have moved from operating in silos to coalitions and collaborations. People like yourself joining with council and persons like Bishop Sheard and Pastor Chapman and Bishop Van and others who were there. So we see the importance and the challenge of us working together. And 2018 is what set the stage for 2022. We had to fight to get absentee ballots so that it was a no excuse issue. And we fixed then what we are now experiencing now. But now that we have it, and again, people are seeing what happened in 2020 when we used it and it turned the colors of Michigan from red to blue, all of a sudden now the oppressive issues come forward, and we have to always stay 2 steps ahead of where the issue might go. One of the things we are doing as a council right now, in 2020, we had 173 poll chaplains across the country because voter intimidation was high. Now, we are doing the same thing again, and we're concentrating pastors with collars on and also connected with lawyers and others to make sure that people are safe when they vote. But to the issue of what we're dealing with Black men, you know, we've got to speak about the cause versus the candidate. Too many people don't see themselves in what's involved and what's happening, but we've got to make it personal and ask them questions directly about jobs and police brutality, you know, the cash bail system, or the issue of their economic issues. They're being attracted by other people because of that.
On that question, the president just recently signed that executive order in terms of granting parole or the expungement of those individuals who had small marijuana. Right. And 6,500 people at the federal level are going to benefit from that. But there are many more in states across the country. And unfortunately, a lot of our folk have been victimized by that process, whether we like it or not. You got Black and brown people who are in jails for marijuana. Is that an issue that should stimulate or spark some interest in the community in terms of wanting to be motivated to go out and vote? As
sure.
one.
But the question is, how do we deal with it? We often speak from an aerial attack and not a hand-to-hand, person-to-person combat. If you talk to them personally about, do you want to deal with voter expungement or expungement of your record, et cetera, sure, they would do that, but they don't tie that into the voting process. We got to connect those dots. because you have lines that are drawn around the corner when it comes to doing it, but they don't see that voting is directly connected to what they are looking for in that outcome. The reason why even now the ballots and things was challenged because we had to stand together and beat it back and help to interpret people that voting is your voice. So we have to make sure that those connected dots are important. Just this week, as I was at Judge Mathis Center walking out after our rally, we had a big rally, everybody was sharing, but on the corner was 10 guys. And as I was walking to my car, they were standing around, and one of them complimented me on my suit. I said, well, thank you. I said, well, you all voting? And they scattered like I just bowled a bowling pin down, and they all went to various corners. When I talked to one of them that I could actually catch and talk to them about how he might be able to better his situations, et cetera, and told him about how voting was, then he began to have the capacity to go back and catch 2 or 3 of them other guys and inform them based on our one conversation. But the issue is it's relationship. You know, we got to take it to where they are and help them interpret how this connects. And the Democratic Party versus Republican Party, this is no longer about left and right. It's about wrong and right for them. And we've got to help make them understand that this is about their interests because they are concerned. Their women are married to the government. They can't find their way or their ability to deal with it. So they're looking for a voice. I mean, there's a lot of things that they will tell you if you really want to know, but you got to really want to know. Find those win-win solutions, and then we can do it. But I do believe, as a matter of fact, one of them asked, could they be part of the college voting chaplains to be able to do it? And I'm liable to give him a license and put a collar on him because he wants to be able to have something to do. He don't like conversations. He just wants to, so what can I do? And that's the thing we got to do, help catch them where they are. You can't clean the fish till you catch them first.
Right. Reverend Dr. David Peoples, thank you for being patient. And Pastor Barrett, thank you for being patient, and everybody else, and Pastor Chaplain. Y'all know it's a bunch of preachers on there, so I don't need to tell y'all nothing. You know how we go. So, I mean, and I ain't the one doing all the talking, y'all are. But at any rate, President David Peoples, I mean, you down there in Lexington, you down there in Kentucky. That's the home, the state where the minority leader of the Senate from Kentucky, and he wants to be the majority leader. And it never ceases to amaze me that some of the worst economically developed states, healthcare, Medicare, I mean, jobs, education. I mean, if you look at them, crime, if you look at them, they're in, I ain't picking on nobody, I'm just calling the facts, they're in the southern part of the country. I mean, Kentucky in this economic situation, and you had the majority leader, there ain't nothing to write home about in terms of some of the stats that you look at. And so here we are facing trying to bring our people to the polls to vote. And you're the head of the Progressive National Baptist Convention, and you got a big job, a big position and a major leader in this country. So I'm just saying, how do you engage this when you're in a state where you see these realities? And it should be easier, but it's still hard to get people to recognize that you better recognize. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm not going back on the plantation. Some folk want to put us back on the plantation, but I ain't going. And so I'm just sending that word out right now. I ain't going. And I hope ain't none of y'all going. But President Peoples, talk to us. What's happening?
Thank you, Brother Anthony and Dr. Johnson and Dr. Pierre, and to all you leaders. It's good to be with you. Brother Anthony, I ain't going back either. But let me say that it is crucial for everyone to take this election seriously. I think the brother said earlier, I remember my birthday is on tomorrow, and it's on November the 8th. And I remember when Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton was running against each other, and I remember the sick feeling that I had in my stomach, because the truth of the matter is that this is a game to them. You know what I mean? They it's in regards to Black and brown lives and poor people. They don't care. You know, it's just all about the wealthy and people getting richer and capitalizing. But after the election took place, I believe even Donald Trump was surprised that he won because polls kept on saying this and polls kept saying the other. And so it behooves everyone to not so much concentrate on polls, but on people. It behooves us to get active, and because I believe that the polls and the polling does not really, there's a lot of people in our community that never get asked about who they're voting for. And so don't hold it against me. Yes, I am in Kentucky. We have a hot mess down here. We have Mitch McConnell and we got Rand Paul. We got two evil people down here I preached a sermon on yesterday, and I talked about when the wrong people are in power, that you'll experience a wickedness, that you'll experience a recklessness, and you'll experience a foolishness. Those things embody those two persons that I just mentioned, Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell. And a lot of our faith people, a lot of our people in general, our Black people, our community, that we get so caught up in just little dangling of carrots. We got people taking pictures with politicians just because they put them on programs, and they're sharing with other people and they're making it seem like that this is the candidate that you all will vote for. But the reality is, don't tell me you love me and then create laws that don't lift me. And so as Progressive National Baptist Convention, the denominational home of Dr. Martin Luther King, we are out here. We're pushing the envelope. We're mobilizing our people. We are proud that Dr. Warnock and Ebenezer are members of PNBC. We're proud of him. It is unfathomable that someone like Dr. Warnock is in such a tight race. But that just tells you the level of animosity. That tells you that people feel emboldened since Trump and so many other people. And so, here in Lexington, you may ask, well, what are we doing here in Lexington? We, as far as the Black faith leaders, we have forums where we try to educate people on what are our laws here in Kentucky. We're trying to tell people this is your poll, this is where you go and vote, and make sure that people know the proper ID. You see so many states that college students cannot vote. Their ID is not good, but a gun license can be used to vote. I mean, this is some backwardness that's going on, and especially here in Kentucky. And so we're proud in PNBC. We have a new partnership with the AFL-CIO, a fresh partnership where we are talking about faith and labor, and their side is working with our side, and we're seeing how we can mobilize people, not just for this election. This election is real, but all the way through going forward into the 2024 and beyond. But we got to tell people, just don't look at the top tickets. You got to look all the way down. It's going all the way down where people are being elected on these local levels. They are making the laws locally. They are making it harder. Secretaries of states, we got to get educated about this and mobilize our people. And I'm proud of PNBC, and I'm proud of all the leaders that are on here doing our part. It's going to take everybody, not just today, as Dr. Chapman's talking about, but we got to go further. It's got to go beyond this, where we got to work hand in hand. And as Dr. Johnson stated, we have to have a better language on how we present this. When people tell people, well, there's a suppression of vote, well, it's not going to matter, then a lot of people buy into that and they won't go out and vote. But we got to be positive in what we're saying and get the vote out.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate you because that's very, very critical in terms of what you're saying. And it does require not just today, but tomorrow. Pastor Barrett, you down there in North Carolina, Charlotte. And there's a lot of history around that. Some good, some not so good. But y'all know about voting. You know about voter suppression. You've had some of the most precise lines, racial lines drawn to eliminate the vote, to reduce the impact of the Black vote. Supreme Court, your coach acknowledged that. So you know about all of that. So facing those challenges, where are we at? I mean, speak to our hearts. You got brothers and sisters there who just don't believe anymore that it's going to make a difference. But we got to convince them that it does. And I thank God that we still are coming out there. This has been the greatest pre-election vote that we've had in years. votes. In Georgia, we got a big pre-election voter turnout in Michigan. You got it in a lot of places, and they are not counting Black voting. Just as Pastor Peoples indicated, I don't think I ever been polled. And I've been voting since I was 16 or 18, whatever the age was. And the Lord has blessed me to be 72 now. And so I've been voting. Ain't nobody never stopped the poll window answer. I've been waiting. Please poll me. I want to give my opinion. And so Black people take one poll, and it's generally when we go out and vote and they start counting. And they usually count us last to the degree that, and we're so unpredictable because we can make a difference. We made a difference before in places like Georgia. We made a difference before in the presidency. It was very clear that when South Carolina Black people came out, that turned the tide for the current president. He says that, he acknowledges that. We know what time it is in Texas because you can use your gun license to register to vote, but you can't use your college ID card. Something's wrong with that, Matt. That's insanity. So, Pastor Barrett, you are a young guy. You involved in this. What are you telling your people about the importance of how to get them engaged in this? Yes, sir.
Well, I think it's important for us to look at the successes that we've had thus far. 47% of the voters are Black men. We can vote. Right now, there has been an increase in voter eligibility by over a percentage point since the last election. So we have the numbers to increase to go out and vote. Over 50%, maybe 57% of eligible voters are in the South. So we have the numbers in the South to go out and vote. I think we need to think of our strengths as we go forward. 7 out of 10 Black people are actually eligible to vote, says the Pew. So we are eligible to vote. Now that we have those weapons in place, I think it's more important for us to continue to speak to the successes that we've had. Back in the special election when Warnock ran before and the other gentleman, this is nonpartisan, but voter turnout increased from the primary election to the special election by over 150,000 votes. I was with Black Church Vote back then, Black Church PAC back then. We worked in Georgia. I stayed in North Carolina because we have a tight Senate race here in North Carolina that the nation's not really talking about like we should be talking about. But there's a candidate, there's Sherry Beasley and Ted Budd are up for election right now. And Sherry Beasley is an African-American woman who was the Supreme Court judge, leader here in North Carolina. We have the candidates to stir up Black people, but we're not connecting. And I think part of this is because,
Mr. Barrett, is she the one that said this bud is not for you?
Say it again.
Is she the one that said this bud is not for you?
Yes, that's the one who said it. That's the one who said it.
I'm being partisan. She said,
but that's what she said. She said this bud is not for you. But I think it's important to understand that we can make a difference if we turn out. But the issues that we're seeing by the different parties don't necessarily speak to our issues. We want prison reform. We want jobs. We want economic development. We want to be able to purchase a home like everybody else can purchase a home. And I think that if we put these things in place and as we articulate it and also make this vote personal, this is hand warfare. We take the manliness out of voting. It's manly to vote. It's manly to have hand-to-hand combat. It's manly to get people together, your brothers together, and go to the polls. That's a manly thing to do because we are men who believe in, I don't know where you come from, but I come from Los Angeles. I'm on the belief that we as young men understand what it is to be at war with one another, let alone to defend ourselves against those who are at war against us. And we make voting manly. We heard that Black women did a great job in the last election. But when I was on the field, I saw Black men out there as well. And we need to highlight those men who are actually fighting the good fight of the faith on the streets in this hand-to-hand combat called voting. Because we are at war, but if we don't say that we recognize that the war is taking place, that we are being incarcerated at a higher number than the others, that the prison system is a private system, that they are now incarcerating us and bringing us back into new forms of enslavement, we need to articulate that to Black men so they understand that this is a man issue for our community, and we are the vanguards of those who defend our community. And that's what voting is.
I appreciate that, and I thank you for that perspective and that analysis. You know, one of the things that they say, some of the posters saying, some of the statisticians have said that some of the reasons that some Black men have gravitated towards a Donald Trump style is that he represents a masculinity, a power kind of a thrust, that he's big and bad and all of that stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that appeals to the Black men. And I'm just wondering, when you look at the fact that, you know, this guy stole documents and they got him at his house, he don't stand up with nobody, and he don't pay nobody. I mean, and he got us in alert. I mean, what's masculine about that? How do you mix those two things together?
Well, when I sat around the table with some of my higher income friends, the ones who go to these Ivy League schools and have these great discussions and doing well financially, they may not vote for him, but they do appreciate the fact that he's a no-nonsense type of guy. He doesn't care what people say about him. He understands what it is to be a man and have a vision and go for it. But I think we have allowed him to take that mantle from us. We've been manly the whole time as well. We've dealt with the heartaches, the difficult times. We've buried friends and seen mothers cry. We've been on the forefront of this struggle for years. And we said we were being nonviolent for a purpose. It was strategic, but at the same time, it was manly to be nonviolent, to stand before those who had weapons and not run from them. And I think that we have to really grab hold of what it is to be a man and not let those like Donald Trump articulate the manliness, but that's a word that those gentlemen are gravitating to, because there are, fortunately or not, there are some who gravitate to a Donald Trump type of person because of his stance. But they have to understand that we have always taken a stance as Black men in the struggle for freedom here in America as it relates to voting and our communities as a whole.
Thank you, sir. We've been joined by Bishop Paul Morton. We thank you. I know he's just gotten off a plane coming back in the country. We appreciate that. I'm going to go to Tellis Chapman. Pastor Chapman, I appreciate you. Thank you for your patience. You've heard all of this conversation. You just heard the last comments. What's your take, Pastor Chapman, as we engage in this?
Thank you, Dr. Anthony and Dr. Pierre. And by the time I get off of this call, man, Dr. Haynes and Bland, somebody gonna have to make us a bishop, because I mean, all the bishops, they've had this great conversation. So we intend to be a bishop in like about 20 or 30 minutes from now. Bishop Morton, you got that. You got it.
I'll wait a year.
Yeah. Listen, man, Adolf Hitler won his party's nomination by one vote. Over 6 million Jews died at the hand of a race baiter who won by one vote.
But you know, when you inject
that,
Rem, you know, when you say that, some people will say, oh, well, how can you compare that to this situation? I mean, we ain't 6 million people.
Well, let's compare it.
And then start off killing 6 million.
Let's compare it, because let's ask this question and go to a point of comparison.
Yes, sir.
How did we feel November 9th, 2016, when we awakened to the stunning results of 48% of American registered voters who did not go vote, which cast the light upon the ignorance of the person who emerged into that position as 45th president of the United States, not because of political prowess or political intelligence or logistical strategies by a political campaign, but because there were two enemies that were not conquered. One was apathy. 48% of the nation didn't go vote. And the other was assumption, and that we believed everything was going to work all right. We had it. And we ended up with a thin-skinned, narcissistic, conceited buffoon who wrecked this country and allowed 1940s, 50s, 60s racism to resurface. So let's ask ourselves, how did we feel the day after the election of 2016? And we realized then how much one vote really made a difference. And because of the non-vote and the principle of that vote, being applied, should it have been applied, we will not have had to deal with this kind of narcissism and dogmatism, classism, anti-Semitism, and sexism present in the White House. This is how we ended up with the dispensation or dispensing with diversity and inclusion offices on our federal level jobs. This is how we ended up with 200 federal judges appointed to benches, most of whom were not vetted properly, blocked by this senator from Kentucky. We all know him, Mitch McConnell, who blocked Barack Obama from appointing those 200 judges and bragged about it after Donald John Trump got his two Supreme Court selections in place and those federal judges throughout this nation. This is a result of not voting, not wanting to vote, apathy and assumption. The George Floyd bill failed. Why? Because there is too much apathy and assumption that is present in the voting bloc, which can influence those who are in seats of power and policy-making positions and who will always be there and remain there because we are not taking the vote seriously. And then there are those who are persuaded, those who are of our color, not of our kinship, and certainly not of our character, which casts light upon the definition of what Black really is. It's not a color, it's a character, and it's a conduct. And we don't have it from the Supreme, well, we got one on the Supreme Court now who is legitimate soul sister. Nevertheless, these are the kinds of issues we must face. Let me piggyback on something President People said a moment ago, and Bishop Palmer and Dr. Bland. We must work on the off season. They didn't use these words, but it was to this essence. Ball players who are playing now, kicking field goals, scoring touchdowns, dunking basketballs, they prepare in the off season. They condition themselves in the off season. And what injuries they may encounter, the hard hits they may encounter while in action on the field, on the court, or wherever, doesn't bother them as much because they prepared in the off season. In the off season, when others are not on the election circuit, we must learn how, or we must rather establish relationships, community forums, ongoing interfaith collaboration, ecumenical collaboration, so that we could strategize to do several things. One, Dr. Anthony, we must establish a relationship with our young Black men, educate them as to the importance and the nuance of the vote. 3, get them registered, establish registrars in our churches, deputy registrars in our churches, in our communities, to get them registered, and then mobilize to make sure that we could get them to the polls to make sure that their vote count. If Hitler can get in office with one vote and nearly destroy a race, if Donald John Trump can get in office because of the lack of nearly half a nation not voting, then the light should come on by now that it is of extreme importance that we register, that we educate, that we mobilize, get our people to the poll. But it's going to begin with establishing a relationship with the Black man and get him back to God. He's got the bling, he got the woman, he has the ride, he can dunk it, he could hit the home run. I mean, he has all of these things going on. He's got the fine tailor-made rags. But once we can get him connected to God and we establish a relationship between the Black man and the church, whether it be a mosque, whether it be a Methodist, Baptist, a Baptist-Costal, Pentamethodist, whatever it is, to make sure we get these brothers reconnected to God, we can reconnect with them. We can educate them about the vote and the policies and the issues. And I promise you, we can vote and determine our own political and socio-economic destiny. That's my take on all of this.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate that. Bishop Morton, they say those who are last shall be first. I mean, so we coming to you now. Bishop Morton down there in Georgia, senior pastor. of the changing generational Full Gospel Baptist Church, and also co-pastor of Greater St. Stephen Full Gospel. I mean, you a pastor, you're a leader. You've been saying something is happening. So what's happening, Bishop, and in terms of how we engage and stimulate our folk? You know how critical this election is. It governs everything, and we find ourselves in crisis again. But whether or not this nation is going to be saved, whether we want to accept it or not, it has a lot to do with the way Black people are going to go, Black men and Black women. And so we're simply trying to stimulate, educate, motivate our folk to get out and take their souls to the polls. Bishop Moore.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anthony, and it's good to be here. I just got in, and I am just so glad to be here and just to be listening to everybody in such a great and awesome panel. Dr. Pierre, the list goes on, and all of my friends online. To me, this is very, very important. It's a game. It's a trick. Satan he's a deceiver, and this is what's happening. And we have been destroyed because of a lack of knowledge. And that's why Dr. Chapman made it very, very plain. It's got to be about education, because I call it a game now, because when you even look at the Republican Party, the way it is, the person means nothing now to Republicans. The agenda is everything. That's all they're concerned about, is winning. So the person right here in Georgia, it's an insult to even have in the same category Dr. Warnock, Senator Warnock, with Herschel Walker, because it's that kind of game. And when you look at that, that's why the Black man really has to be careful, and we can't allow them to play a game on us. Look, one is smart, one is not. One is ignorant, and one is intelligent. One is qualified, one is not. But how do they really think behind closed doors? These are just two Black men, and they both ignorant. And the ignorant one we're going to use can help us with our agenda. And somehow the Black man really, really has to understand that they don't care anything about us. That's how all of this started from January the 6th. What did they try to cut off? Any city that had majority Black people. That's the one those are the cities that they said the election was stolen. And if the Black man doesn't understand that, I mean, even, hey, economy is important, but I shared with our people on yesterday, and Dr. Pierre was there with us with President Derek Johnson, and I said, we got to let the main thing be the main thing. The main thing is not gas prices. The main thing, that's not the main thing. The food, I know that's important for people to have food, but it's not the main thing. Because if you've been living any length of time, we know that prices go up and down. Inflation goes up and down. How many times have we been through this? It goes up and down. But the main thing that we better deal with now is those who are winning, who are proud to be election deniers. It's to stop us. Once we lose our freedom, I don't care. You can drive your Mercedes, whatever. Once you lose your freedom, you're just a slave driving a Mercedes. You have to get our Black men to wake up, to really see, hey, we got to know who we are. And finally, we can't blame it on God. Please don't blame it on God. God's already warned us. He's already told us, you reap what you sow. Now, he's already warned us. We reap what we sow. So don't wake up Wednesday morning talking about this is a disgrace. Lord, how could you let us down? It ain't the Lord's fault. Faith without works is dead. We have to teach our people to sow a vote. Sow your vote so you can reap victory. And to me, that's how we do it. So waking our Black men up and letting them know that even with the Democratic Party, it's the best thing going right now. It's not perfect, but at least it's giving us an opportunity to be at the table. Thank you so much, Dr. Anthony.
Thank you, Bishop. And of course, you have the right to say whatever you want. You can be partisan, nonpartisan. I mean, I'm in ACP, so I have to be kind of in the middle. But all you're doing is speaking the truth to power.
That's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing.
And I appreciate you speaking the truth to power, because if you tell the truth, the record is very clear. On one side, you got this stuff. On the other side, you got this stuff. And if our people need anything, it is the truth. And the word is, I think I read somewhere where it said the truth is the light, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And so I think that we're simply trying to tell the truth. Freddie Haynes.
Ride this donkey then to get stumped on by that elephant, though.
Well, you know, Bishop, I mean, I already made you a bishop, Blaine. You asked for to be a bishop. Freddie, you speak in a language, as many of us, where folk understand it. I mean, you known as being clear and direct and speaking in a language folk understand. I mean, we got one day, Freddie. Tomorrow morning, we go to the polls. 7 o'clock in the morning, they open up here in Detroit, I think around the country. We got from 7 o'clock until 8 o'clock tomorrow night. That's the time our polls are open. We're gonna have challenges out there. We're gonna have poll watchers. We're still making calls tonight, even while we're sitting doing this program. We have calls being made right now to get the vote out. I mean, we're doing everything that we can do to try to push the vote out. For those folk who are still at home on the couch, who are watching this and who are saying that, you know, I just don't know, what the heaven do you say to them? I mean, in terms of moving them off the dime. I mean, we may not get another chance. 2024 is around the corner. This is basically, for some people, this is a trial run for what may happen in 2024 if we get there. And we got a guy who may run again for the president who should be underneath the jail.
Right.
We all know that. But yet the country and many people are saying that we can't do nothing and giving him every. Do you realize that Barack Obama had taken hundreds of
Just one document, man. Just one.
To his house in Chicago or in Hawaii? Well, me and Michelle getting ready to leave now. We're gonna put all the stuff in the boxes, and we out of here. What do you think?
And think about declassify them. Just think about it.
Yeah, I mean, Freddie Haynes, talk to us.
I think it's very important. And again, the panel has been absolutely brilliant. And for me, De La Soul puts it like this: the times is hard and the stakes is high. And I think we've got to think on those terms. We are literally in a state of emergency. This was overlooked by a lot of people, but it was a month ago that the term or the phrase civil war was trending on social media.
Yes, sir.
Civil war. And they were not talking about 1861 to 1865. They're talking about right now. Yeah. So, and again, there was no one on this panel who was speaking of a civil war, okay? Because no one has believed in democracy like those who look like us on this on this panel. And so if there are those who are thinking civil war, if the times is hard, and Bishop Morton, thank you for that, for putting in perspective priority. Slaves driving Mercedes, that needs to be on a billboard somewhere, because as long as we think in terms of individual success and not communal success and not what? Country success, then the sad reality is we are setting the stage to be well-dressed slaves, slaves driving good cars. And there is nothing in what Bishop Morton said that is hyperbolic. It is as real as the truth is real. And I think we've got to connect the dots. And so I could go with the negative, but let me say to everyone tuned in right now, let's go positive. On the positive end, when you vote, do you not recognize that you are basically saying, this is what I want? I'd like to have clean water. Well, vote like it. I'd like to have equitable education. You vote that in. You will not get equitable education. We will not have economic development without you voting it in. And so everything you say you want, everything you're dreaming about, it can be accomplished through voting. Now listen, if you don't want nothing, you won't get nothing. But here's the bad thing. Not only will you not get anything, but as has been said, even what you have will be taken from you. I think that's biblical right there. And so I think it's very important for us let's go positive. It's easy to say, okay, folk died so we can have this right. I get that. But listen, we owe it not just to those who died, we owe it to those we want to live long after we have lived. And we will do that by the vote that we cast. And the vote that we cast says, yeah, I want clean water. Yes, I want to make sure the criminal justice system is just and not criminal. Yes, I want to make sure that we have economic empowerment and development on our side of town. Yes, I want to make sure that voter suppression is no longer a reality. Yes, I want to make sure that my children, watch this, can actually get Head Start. I want to make sure I can have all of these things that make for a country where liberty and justice for all is a reality. If you want anything, vote for it. If you don't want nothing, don't handcuff us with your nothing wanting self. Make sure that you do what's best for yourself, but also for our future.
Appreciate it. Pastor Moore and Pastor Barry, a lot of activists, and I run into them, you run into them. When something happens, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, I mean, so many, Freddie Gray, so many, you can just name them. Protests, but no practice. Protests in terms of demonstrations, and we all participate in them. Gotta have it. Protest calls attention to certain situations. In terms of connecting the dots, and we get upset with police chiefs who may not be as transparent and honest about what's going on. Police chiefs, at least in our area, are appointed by mayors. Mayors of cities appoint police chiefs. Mayors are elected. City council members who vote on wages, police, and program are elected officials. So when you're talking about you don't want to participate and you want to make a change, how can you substantively make a change if in fact you don't engage in that process? One of the basic processes that you are concerned about is police reform. You want a police chief that's going to hear you. You want a police chief that's going to be sensitive. Well, how do you get it? You elect the mayor. You elect the mayor, city council that's going to hear what your concerns are. Doesn't that make sense?
I think it makes perfect sense. And I think that that's yet another reason why forums and gatherings like this are so essential, because I think, at least for my generation, part of the problem is that we are ignorant, in some cases, unfortunately, willfully, as to what the process looks like. We feel in too many pockets of our community that if we vote for a president, that is in a certain party, then our neighborhood is suddenly going to change on election day, because we don't understand that that is not how it works. So many of us think that the president, it is his job to make sure our streets are clean in our neighborhood, to make sure our schools are fair, to make sure our local law enforcement policies and procedures are fair and balanced. When in reality, those decisions happen on the local level, which is why the disparity in voter turnout on national elections, even though that is not what it should be, it is so different from what we see in our midterms and what we see on our local levels. And that's because we do not understand the process, which is why education matters, because it is absolutely a cycle. If we do not get the right people in the right places, and that is at every level, that is at the federal level, that is at the state level, that is at the local level, that is at the community level. I just took over our church here in the city of Atlanta 9 weeks ago, and President Johnson was there on yesterday. We've had 148 people join in 9 weeks. But one of the first things I did was get connected to our local high school up the street. I got connected to our local neighborhood. If I want to know the lady over the neighborhood watch, I want to know everybody on this level, because that's where change takes place. That's where the real work is done. And if we can emphasize that and highlight that, then maybe we can raise the consciousness and the awareness of our men of color as to why these elections matter. So many people that I've talked to, and I'm giving it to Dr. Barrett, but so many people that I've talked to, they feel that voting once every 4 years in a presidential election is their reasonable service. And they feel that they have done enough. If I voted that one time way back when I voted for President Obama, well, he is fully retired and living his best life now. That is not helping us today. That is not helping our young Black boys and girls. That is not helping our schools. That is not helping our neighborhoods. That is not helping us navigate gentrification and all of these other issues that are impacting us all over the country. And so we have to have a better understanding of the process, which is why education and work like that, that the NAACP is doing, is so absolutely essential.
Pastor Barrett.
Well, I think it's a continuous process. I think we've articulated it thus far. Many people have said it. It has to be an ongoing process of education and activity and engaging people. We here in North Carolina and Charlotte more particularly have a gentleman who was an activist, a street protester after George Floyd, who was on the front lines of that, got elected to city council. Now he's he's on the pro tem, prepared to be the next mayor, possibly, of the city of Charlotte. And he was a on-the-ground protester. We have to continue to educate people of the process, which what Brother Mark was saying. I had the pleasure of running for mayor when I lived in Indiana against a guy by the name of Pete Buttigieg. He became head of the transportation department. I became pastor. But that all came about because of recognizing the relevance and the importance of how we engage on the local level. We have to also take responsibility as men of leaders, as leadership, to either create leaders, prepare leaders, or be leaders who run for office as well, to show the relevance and how it's connected to our daily lives. That's imperative that we do that as well. I, as a pastor, I meet with every person who represents my church community in my area. I meet with the city council, the county commissioners, the mayor, the police chief, the fire department, anybody who's connected to represent my people. I want them to know me, and I want them to engage with me. I met with the senator today for lunch, because it's imperative that we as leaders in our community also engage those who represent us. And we can't wait for them to come 3 weeks out from election day to our pulpits to say, get out to vote. It has to be something that's continuously going forward. And I think now this generation is catching on the fact that has to be engagement as well as holding those people accountable once you engage them as we go through the process. And we're doing that. And we're seeing it here in Charlotte. We are seeing it being manifested.
Thank you, Pastor Barrett. Bishop Morton, I know that you are so-called retired, but you never retire from the work, from the struggle. And so I know that, and as a founder of Full Gospel and the overseer of the church, you know that what the future holds, but you're more importantly, you know who holds the future. As we look towards the future in terms of this nation and our political situation, I mean, what do you see? Even if Donald Trump stopped tonight, the system has so been poisoned, infected, that the germs that he has left is still infecting and contagious all around our country. What do you see as the trend? When I hear Pastor Barrett and I hear young preachers who are coming up, getting engaged, and they're gonna have to deal with this stuff when some of us are not here. What do you see as the trend? Where are we headed, and what should we be looking for?
Thank you again, Dr. Anthony. I just believe it's very, very important. And I know we've been talking about the Black man tonight and what the Black man needs to do. But I really believe the Black preacher has to begin to step up to the plate again. Mm-hmm. Listen, we can't stand out if we blend in. Mm-hmm. And the Black preacher used to be so respected. But the goal of the world is to make the church irrelevant, that you're not important anymore. Don't depend on the Black preacher to be that voice that can speak into your lives.
But Bishop, you got so many preachers who are talking about pie in the sky when you die and get mine while you live. I mean, it's like we face that kind of situation. What do you say to those brothers and sisters who are more interested and other than in the by and by than the right now and here? I want some cake while I can bake it while I'm here able to take it, rather than just waiting on the by and by. That's part of what we're facing.
Yeah, the by and by is going to come. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth. I want the blessings that God has for me on this earth. And so we have to begin to really even understand that, because you have a lot of people that they're talking about, well, all we need to do in this season, that's all the church is supposed to do is pray. That's not all the church is supposed to do. We have to be the voice. The only reason Jesus was crucified, Jesus wasn't crucified because he stayed up in the mountain and prayed. He was crucified because he came down and got in the fight. And so everybody is not going to like us, but we have to know that we have to live here now for our children, our children's children. We have to show them how important it is to get what you're supposed to get, and then you have to work to get it. There's some things that you have to do to get it. So to me, that's what's important. But again, and of course we have major pastors on here, but compared to pastors across this nation, Black pastors, I really think, because some of us don't say nothing. Mm-hmm. Some pastors haven't even mentioned it in their church that November is the final election day. That's sad.
Yes, sir.
So we really have to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. Brothers and sisters, about 8 minutes left, and I want to.
Might I add a quick point to what the bishop just
all right,
said?
I'm coming to you, Doc. I want to do this because we've got 8 minutes left. I'm going to start with you. I'd like for everybody to take a minute and give your point, your closeout, so we can get everybody in, because we're going to end this at 7. And we can start with Dr. Bland, but I want you to take a moment and to say something about that's uplifting to the brothers and to our community, in addition to the point you're going to make, Dr. Bland, but say something that they can take to the voting booth with them and why this is so important. Dr. Bland.
Let me just say, and again, thank all of you who are on this conversation. To what Bishop just said, we've got to connect the issue of protests and policy change, candidates, with the things that make the difference. I was just thinking when he was talking about how Mike Brown's death in Ferguson, Missouri caused all of those people to be in the streets to deal with that particular issue. But then when the voting time came, there was only one person on the ballot, which was the prosecuting attorney, that actually did the damage to him, and nobody ran against him, and he went back in again, and no policies changed.
Mhm.
We have to make sure we help people to understand that it's not really about who you're voting for directly, but what you're voting for. And we've got to have that in conversations with people to help them interpret it. Then we have to have civic classes and engagement, not only in our dialogue and our preaching and our teaching, but we've got to have one-on-one conversations and classes when the week is there and our churches' doors are closed. We got to sit down and talk to them. It doesn't take a lot of them, but we got to start with the few and have that to grow and talk to them about how this makes it happen. But then to the closing point, I would say to us that your vote is your voice. The issue is that if you, whatever it is you seek that you want to make that change, we together are going to have to reconnect with our men in our churches and our boys in our churches in partnership with our women. This dialogue today is not anti-female, anti-women. It's the fact we've got to bring up the dualism of men and women, boys and girls working together to change our community. The village must rise. And
Thank you, Doc. And 60 seconds, brothers. I know how hard that is, but 60, man, give me 50 seconds because we got to go at 7 o'clock. 50 seconds. Pastor Palmer, Bishop Palmer.
Thank you again, Dr. Anthony, for allowing me to be on here with these great minds. I just want to just really touch on what the great Bishop Morton had mentioned, and I just put it in one term: servant leadership. We have to be the example as pastors and be out on the forefront. Martin Luther King and all from the days of old, the civil rights movement, it was the church. And we need to get the church back, but it's going to start with the Black pastor. And so I want to just say that sentiment. And what more can we say? November 8th is right here. Vote. And we're going to be out there leading the pack, saying and heralding the sound, vote.
Thank you, Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Bishop. Pastor Barrett?
Yes, I'm going to close with just quickly. For us, 60% of the eligible Black voters are 49 and younger. It is this block that needs to turn out. It's up to us. And also just, we got to man up. Voting is being a man. And we are in a time right now that the enemy is attacking us every day and positioning us for failure if we allow it. Let's not allow it. Let's take control of our lives. Let's man up and let's vote.
Thank you, Pastor Barrett. President Peoples.
You just got to tell everybody it's time to vote. You got to vote. Take this seriously. It's not a game. This is real. This is real life, real issues. It's so real. As a pastor here in Kentucky, I'm at the point, and I told my membership that if I find out that you did not vote, I just might give you your church letter. It's a serious. You got to vote. Get out and vote.
Thank you, President. We hope nobody don't get those letters. Amen. Dr. Chapman.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony, and to all of you here. So much is at stake here. Presidential power is at stake. Qualified immunity, police reform, they're at stake. Voting rights is at stake. Affirmative action is at stake. Women's rights is at stake. And the Black community and the Black man is at stake.
Yes.
That's what's on the ballot. These are the things that are on the ballot. And beyond the ballot, we've had one November 9th result that we've been plagued with since that day by a person who's done worse than Watergate. We don't want to wake up November 9th, 2022, feeling just as bad because we did not turn out our people. Lastly, we've got to have this forum during the off season so that we could strategize, mobilize, and become proactive relative to our socioeconomic and socio-political destinies. Thanks again.
Thank you, Pastor Chapman. Bishop Morton.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'll just take a moment. In fact, I tweeted it out today. If voters vote for democracy, we will win. If we don't, kiss democracy goodbye as we know it today. We got to vote. Thank you.
Bless your heart. Thank you, Bishop. Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes.
Again, thank you so much, Dr. Wendell Anthony, for your leadership. Dr. Zena Pierre, both of you are gifts to all of our colleagues across the country. Please hear this lovingly, and that is the revolution will not be televised, Gil Scott-Heron, but it will be theologized. And we've got to connect our theology of justice to our homiletic as well as our hermeneutic. That attracts generations that are now basically saying, I'm spiritual, but not religious. They want to connect Jesus with justice. To my beautiful Black brothers, I say, just as Malcolm said about Black women, that they are most neglected, unprotected, and disrespected. Black men are the most weaponized, vilified, and invisibilized. Evidently, there's a power that we have yet to exercise. And so I encourage you to recognize your power. Your power begins with what you do at the polls on tomorrow. You've been weaponized, invisibilized, and vilified because evidently you got the power. Now let's use it.
Thank you, Freddie. Thank you to all of you for spending these 2 hours with us. I know on the eve of the election, it's tight, but we appreciate you. And I hope that folk were blessed by what they have heard. I just want to say this: take your souls to the polls and vote like your life depended upon it, because quite frankly, it does. We got to be in it until we win it. And we've come too far to be turned back now. And we said earlier, I don't know about y'all, but I ain't going back to the plantation. Ain't nothing there. God bless you. Thank you, Dr. Zena Pierre, for helping to facilitate this and coordinate this. Thanks all of you. And remember, we got to be in it until we win it. God bless you. See you on the Freedom Trail. Good evening.